Welcome to the Two Gurus Talk Compliance podcast with me, Kristy Grant-Hart. I'm here with the one and only Tom Fox. This week, we're celebrating the newest FCPA enforcement action, watching the world respond to corruption scandals in Ukraine, Mexico, and the Philippines, wondering why a defendant in a banking scandal expensed something called cellulite butter, and marveling at Florida man's t-shirt advertising that he had drugs to sell. But first, Tom, how has your week been and what's the most interesting development?
Actually, when you just read about our Florida man story, I realized I'm not marketing the t-shirts properly.
What do you want to say? I've got compliance. Come and get it.
Hey.
People might like it. All right, Tom, we're heading into the end of this year. As why might next year be the hardest year for some specific people?
I didn't want to sound too overwhelmed, but remember our trillion-dollar friend Elon Musk?
I do, yes.
Well, he has told his employees at Tesla that next year will be the hardest year of their life. And I just love it when people make $1 trillion on the backs of all of their workers. And actually, a little disappointed you didn't implement this in Spark, but I'm hoping that as you rise in diligence and take over, you will see the value in this. And just tell everyone it will be the hardest year of your life. It will be the worst year of your life. The beatings will continue until both productivity and morale improve. And welcome to 2026.
Yeah, so the article details how Tesla and the AI bosses there said that it is going to be the hardest year of your lives. That's primarily because of the Optimus division, which wants 10,000 robo-taxis in all these different locations in the United States by the end of next year. How many people do you think decided to quit because of this? I'm being told that it's going to be the worst year of your life.
That's a really good question. I'm hoping there's some compliance openings in Tesla.
Yeah, I'm sure you'd join right away. I took a Waymo for the first time in Phoenix this past couple months ago, Tom, and it got lost. And there's no one to tell it it's lost. It went to the wrong entrance of the hotel that we were staying at, this huge resort place, went to the back entrance, and there's no one to go to the front. So I had to call the emergency people and have them reroute the thing. I gotta tell you, I'm not so convinced about robo-taxis at this point. So we'll see how they do. I'm not sure.
As an employer, I just can't believe this. It's beyond belief.
I don't think it's a good idea. All right. So, Tom, I'm going to switch gears here. I don't know if you ever heard the Monty Python sketch about the dead parrot. Have you ever heard about that?
Sure.
Yeah. It's where somebody brings the dead parrot back to the pet store and says it's dead. And the pet store owner says, no, it's not dead. It's just sleeping. It's very clearly dead. The FCPA was supposed to be that, but it may slightly be alive and well. It may just have been sleeping because a company called Millicom issued a press release describing its long, tortured way to a deferred prosecution agreement. This review comes from our good friend Matt Kelly at Radical Compliance. So the conduct took place in Guatemala at a joint venture of Millicom called Comcel. And the conduct was way back in 2010. So they found out about this bribery conduct in 2015, self-disclosed, but basically said, listen, we don't have control over this joint venture. We can't control what they do. The Justice Department closed the investigation in 2018 without any action. But in 2021, Millicom finally gained control of its JV and went, oh, no, this isn't good again, self-disclosed, noting that it now understood everything that had gone on and is repenting, growing its compliance program, doing all of the things. Actually, right now, we don't have the details because the DOJ hasn't released anything. Millicom actually put out its own press release. And so Matt Kelly's review for the rest of the article was talking about how difficult it is to have JVs where you don't have control. But even if that's the case, that you really need to have transparency and understand what's happening, especially from a board reporting perspective. So Matt called his title, FCA Enforcement is Happening, ! When we thought that the FCPA was dead, not just resting. Is this the beginning of more FCPA action, Tom, or is this a blip?
Actually, I would not characterize it as either, because number one, the fact pattern is incredibly instructive around the issue of joint venture with the FCPA. Point one. Point two is Matt actually found that so I've had a chance to get a little more information on this case. And the funds that were used to pay the bribe came from drug cartel, ill-gotten gains, laundered in a bank. And I had wondered how a FCPA case could have the necessary issues that this administration deemed significant, as set forth in the May memo, and the cartel is one of them. And this speaks precisely this point. And it actually gives a great description of why you need to do a much more expansive due diligence now. Because it turned out that the joint venture was banking with a bank that was being used by the cartels. Not clear if it was owned by the cartels, but how often do you look at the ownership of the bank who joint venture uses and trace even that information? So I thought it was a very instructive case. Whether it's a blip or a sign of things to come, I don't know. But if I can go back to the joint venture part, joint ventures have always been problematic. And you had FCPA enforcement actions where a foreign government owned as little as 32%, and that was deemed instrumentality of the foreign government. That moved percentage of ownership. And typically when you have any ownership, they're going to have control, particularly in the country in question. Doesn't matter whether you're majority owner or not. So the best you can do is try to have some transparency by having one of your people on the executive leadership team, most hopefully as the CFO, so you have visibility of the money. So I think the place is very instructive. It's an old joint venture, but when they own it that was really borne out because there's apparently additional criminal proceedings in play through this GPA. You see how the invidiousness of cartels and their designations as foreign terrorist organizations could open up a potentially entire new realm of liability for companies as well. Now, this did not happen in Mexico, so it's not even the Mexican FTO, it's Guatemala. But I think that was a pretty interesting and, at the end of the day, fruitful case for lessons learned.
Okay. That's really interesting, Tom. Thank you for bringing up the DPA, which obviously we hadn't seen at the time when Matt wrote this article. So interesting. I thank you for teaching me about that. What's happening around Ukraine?
I picked several articles today that talk about institutional corruption at some major U.S. allies, important countries across the globe. And the first one is Ukraine. And we have a massive corruption scandal that is unfolding. The article I picked simply is one of many. The story is ongoing and it's evolving daily, but it involves people very close to President Zelensky, $100 million corruption fraud on the country, their energy company, which is nationalized, so it's a foreign, or it's a governmental entity of Ukraine. And if this gets closer to Zelensky, this is going to be terrible for U.S. relations, because you know exactly what Trump is going to do. He's going to start claiming, well, we're not going to defend corruption. I'm against corruption. All of that nonsense. But this is a horrible look for Zelensky. It's horrible for the people of the country of Ukraine. And if they were going to steal $100 billion from this war-torn country, that really shows the invidiousness of corruption. This is not a white-collar crime where there are victims. There's some significant victims because energy is actually lifeblood in Ukraine, particularly in the winter. So, like I said, it's several stories, but this one, it's just getting worse and worse by the day for Zelensky.
Yeah, I read quite a bit about this, and it is amazing the number of senior people within the government, people who were his former business partner before he took office. I really sincerely hope there was question marks about the different prosecutions and how they'll go forward. And I truly hope that there isn't interference and that we can get to the bottom of this, hopefully in a way that protects Ukraine and continues to support what they're doing.
So, about AI testing.
How about AI testing? This was really interesting, I thought. So the next article I picked was called Where in the Loop? Testing AI across 120 compliance tasks to find out where humans are most needed. So this was actually published by Corporate Compliance Insights, but it was about EQS, which is one of the vendors in our space. They tested 6 AI models across 120 real-world compliance tasks, basically to challenge and find out when everyone says that no, none of the jobs will be here ever again. Let's see, where actually are we within the compliance field? And it found out something that I thought was pretty intuitive, which is that when the AI is tasked with a very clear rule-based work, it can do it really well. That include things like classifying policies or risk ranking according to a matrix, and they did it with an average of 90% accuracy. But when it comes to the actual hard work of a lot of compliance officers, which is that nuanced, judgment-based scenarios, it did pretty dismally. In fact, the weakest model only scored 28%, not exactly what we want from a compliance department. So the conclusion really was where ambiguity exists, humans are still quite necessary. But it did note that the models are, in fact, getting better. So Gemini 2.5 Pro and GPT-5 delivered overall accuracy that was at 85%, with only 3 clear hallucinations. And while clear hallucinations aren't great, for us, it was less than 1% of the responses. The article pointed out that in many compliance-related circumstances, errors just aren't acceptable. Right? What happens if it's taking a whistleblower report or responding to categorization that then sends the report to the wrong place? It's not ideal. So the author talks about the future of AI and compliance working together as collaborators so that AI can set up and do initial analysis, but humans need to make final decisions. And I thought this was quite a good quote from the article, which says, quote, "This means that compliance professionals must become translators between regulations, policies, and AI usage within compliance programs," unquote. So translators. There's a lot to unpack there, Tom. What struck you most about the research? I was quite impressed with the rigor and the extent of the analysis.
I was really impressed by this report, and independent of you and I getting together, I actually had the opportunity to interview Steph Holmes Monday on this report. So I got a little bit deeper dive into it. And I think this is exactly what the compliance community needs. This type of information, this type of commentary, and I applaud EQS for bringing this forward, because you detailed many of the insights, but it gives us all an ability to look at and benchmark our own programs, our own low-hanging fruit, our own sandboxes, whatever it may be, and where we are. And I told Steph this, like I just said, this is exactly what we need. And it also allows us to focus on the tools that seem to be doing the best. So Gemini, ChatGPT, everybody, they're all a little different. And if you can have one or more of these tools to do the task, I think you can really facilitate a program with AI program within your company. But I really can't say enough about this report, the information it brings us in Q4 of 2025, and how the compliance professional can use it.
I'm going to be really interested. I would advocate for EQS to make this an annual thing that they do, because I think that if we can watch the evolution of how compliance officers can handle and utilize AI and where we shouldn't, that over time will be really interesting to do. So there we go.
Volter to believe.
You what?
I told Steph the same thing.
Oh yeah, 100%. 100%. Wish I'd done it myself. All right, let's move from one scandal that was not a scandal, but your last one, Tom, is one scandal to another scandal. Where are we moving off from Ukraine next?
So we're moving over to the Philippines, and this has been an ongoing story for multiple weeks. It started around corruption in rebuilding after floods. The Philippines has had a series of major floods, even for them. over the past 18 months, and I think 93% of the funds have been stolen. It's just horrible. The level, the invidiousness of corruption, and how it's prevented the Philippines from rebuilding, and the people of the Philippines have frankly had enough, and they haven't gone after the president yet. And he said he's going to go after those responsible, but we'll have to see. But it's so bad that people are rising up to protest, and there's hundreds of thousands protesting in Manila last weekend before this one. And I think we're going to continue to see this going forward, and it's just a part of the overall invidiousness of international bribery, corruption, and why it's not a victimless crime, and it destroys societies. And it may destroy the government of the Philippines, just like it might destroy the government of Ukraine.
Tom, the article you pointed to said that Philippines was one of the most flood-prone countries in the world. Do you think that there is a huge trend essentially toward coming out against the government and being willing to protest, and that these things are now public pieces of information with videos all over the world? Do you think that these things are connected in terms of people rising up and responding to this? And do you think we'll see that trend continue?
If you go back to the Arab Spring, that was about corruption.
Yeah.
Or Tunisian self-help over the issue of corruption. So we've had significant protests about this, and at some point, a country's population has gotten pushed, and protests in Hungary, we saw Serbia, other Eastern European countries last year. And I think the current generation that is leading these protests, Gen Zs and millennials, are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that they want to do something. And whether that leads to an overthrow or a velvet revolution, I don't know. But you can clearly see where it may go in Ukraine. And if the numbers of people protest in the Philippines, and then the next one we'll talk about a significant change.
All right, let's go to something weirder. One of the weirder headlines I've ever seen. So, Tom, it doesn't happen all that often, but you and I both picked the same article, and I think because of its kind of lunacy, we both were attracted to this. Also, we've been following it for quite some time. So, here is the headline from the Wall Street Journal. Charlie Javis build hotels and cellulite butter as legal fees, according to JP Morgan. All right. So for those of you who haven't been following this very closely, there was originally a bidding war for a company run by Charlie Javis called Frank. And basically, it was supposed to be a place where all sorts of Gen Zs were getting scholarships. And basically what happened was the banks really want to get to that user base. They had a very slim, shall we say, due diligence process, and they uncovered after the sale huge amounts of fraud and lying, and this was actually prosecuted by the government. So this article focuses on the costs billed to JP Morgan Chase as part of the $74 million in legal expenses that Ms. Javis incurred while defending herself on charges of defrauding the bank. I was very perplexed a bit, Tom, that the reason they were paying her legal bills was because an order of the court ordered her to pay those legal bills. As you might imagine, JP Morgan Chase is fighting that right now. So I found it fascinating that the bank has now been billed almost as much for their defense as they paid to buy the startup in the first place. Due diligence people, okay. She allegedly billed all kinds of stuff to the company through this legal billing, including meals out, fancy hotels, and personal grooming items such as cellulite butter, in case you're wondering, which is supposed to reduce the appearance of cellulite. Good to know. Definitely a legal bill. The bank is trying to get out of this court order, but already knows it will never recoup its fees. All right, Tom. Politely obnoxious article. The moral of the story continues to be, for me, do your due diligence up front or pay for it later. Why did you pick this one, and what did you want to say?
This article was clearly written by JP Morgan, PR fly. This is a complete whitewash of JP Morgan trying to slander someone who sold them a company that they didn't bother to look at, and they claim they got to. Guess what? Cellulite butter makes you feel better. And if you feel better, you're going to be a better defender. So I am all for feeling like I'm a better defender. Number
So
one.
says Tom. All right, there we go.
I haven't gotten finished yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say pro-cellulite butter. I got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Please.
there you go. The reason J.P. Morgan is paying her defense is they gave her an indemnity in the sale agreement. The court simply enforced the officers insurance denied coverage. So Morgan's on the hook for the full amount. And they're doing everything they can to slander this to try to influence the judge to do something. But guess what? See what Kristy says. Your due diligence. Look into somebody's numbers. If they claim they have 30,000 customers, maybe ought to count one or two to see if they're really living, breathing customers. But she got a full indemnity, which the court enforced. So that's the reason she's getting her payments made. And J.P. Morgan didn't do their due diligence. That doesn't excuse her fraud. The court found that. The court sentenced her to, I think, 7 or 8 years in prison. It's a not insignificant fine. But just crying over spill bill. What's $75 million to J.P. Morgan for?
All righty. Let's move to our third country protesting corruption. Where are we going to next, Tom?
We're headed down to Mexico, and it's not unusual to have protests over corruption, oppression, abuse, whatever in Mexico. But this one's over the government's inability to do something about the cartels and stop crime. And it's a problem for all generations of Mexicans. We had more protests over this. Thousands of people protested in Mexico City. There were some pretty dramatic photos of tear gas and defensive actions by the authorities. And it's, once again, bribery and corruption. And just to have these 3 major tests, 2 if you only count the Philippines and Mexico and Ukraine, in a different set of facts and circumstances. But I just found all of this tied together, and it shows that we have to figure out a way to go with this.
Yeah. This was a really poignant piece. It's in the New York Times, and there's, like he said, lots of pictures and personal stories. Honestly, the part that really made me angry was the response of the president of Mexico, who said that this was an inorganic activity of paid protesters. And if you actually look at what's happening, especially on the border where the women are disappearing, and we see all of this drug activity from the compliance standpoint, I really, truly hope that designation of these cartels as transnational criminal organizations that are going to be focused on by the Department of Justice, that this will make a difference, and that we as a compliance community, in really watching for this more vigilantly, are going to be able to be part of the solution. But it really is it's a challenging time, but a good one that people are responding to it.
Okay.
All right, let's switch gears entirely. All this depression. This one comes from Corporate Compliance Insights as well, and it's about high-risk sectors embracing the idea of a fractional general counsel. So this article, while it is most definitely an advertisement for the idea of fractional general counsels, basically the author said, listen, we need part-time fractional general counsels to come in for a number of reasons. And it's smart, according to him. It cuts legal costs generally because you don't have a full-time person in the role all the time. Can be used with a predictable monthly retainer. So it's not like outside counsel charging $2,000 an hour. It's a person what their fee is. It can also be a short-term replacement, for instance, for maternity leave. Or if something gets nuts, they can have an in-house person with greater capacity, even if you have maybe a full-time lawyer in a role regardless. And basically, it can scale up and down. So the author highlights the experience also that comes from having a general counsel who works in multiple places at once. That's often cited as a reason that people work with folks like Spark Compliance, because we see 20 compliance programs at once as opposed to one, and then over decades see tons of them. But Tom, I wanted to talk to you about this model because the first time I ever heard about a fractional CEO or an outside CCO was when I went to a conference that Charles Schwab put together in Texas about a decade ago. And it was all broker-dealers. So it's small companies that then had an obligation for a CEO, but did the external ones a lot of the time. So I have seen also some compliance consultants try to make this model work in corporate compliance and haven't seen it be successful. But is that just a matter of time? Do you think that the compliance community will accept or want fractional chief compliance officers, or is this really a niche thing that this guy's trying to sell?
I think the answer to both of your last two questions could be yes. I stumbled across a fractional GC, I think in 1992, when a friend of mine developed a program he called Rent a General Counsel. And he moved his practice.
A general counsel?
Rent a General Counsel. And it was a fractional GC. I adopted that model in the first decade of this century, when I moved from the trial lawyer to the purpose lawyer. I wasn't very successful at it, so I had to go back to a trial lawyer. I'm very comfortable with the model. I have been a fractional CCO. I have been a fractional GC. It is very niche. And it has to be the right company, though. It has to be a company who's willing to have someone work on a limited time frame. It's typically around one or two major projects, usually trying to get the company ready to be sold. But it can be a major project and something that Spark Consulting does on a routine basis. So it is a model that I think is underutilized. Some of the big compliance hiring firms, employment firms, have tried to implement this over the years, and no one's really been successful, and I'm not quite sure why.
Yeah, I'm not either. People ask me about this sometimes when they're starting their consulting firms and say, I think this is a great model. And frankly, I think it makes a lot of sense to me too, especially for the kind of smaller companies that have a lawyer that's never done compliance trying to pretend to do compliance. But I don't know. Maybe we'll see it. I think people are just scared of it. I don't know. We'll see if it ever happens, but... All right. Last time, Tom, we talked about some gambling scandals. Do you want to get back into it? What's going on there?
The NBA is still percolating along with its gambling scandals. And the NBA has realized they need to do their own internal investigation. And so they're going back and really interviewing a lot of teams and players. Unfortunately, the Lakers are one of those because one of the defendants was with the Lakers at the time when he allegedly gained inside information. And I just want to reemphasize, when you have a big fraud case, get a big time investigative firm in there, do it in-house. If you have a serious problem, it requires a serious response. And if the NBA had taken these seriously, when the original allegations came up that they investigated in 2023, they cleared one of the players of this. He's now under criminal indictment. So it must be something there. And I have really swung around to thinking, do you have a serious matter? You need to bring in a serious investigative counsel. You need it for privilege. You need it for all the reasons of their independence. You need them to be able to spit truth power in a way that perhaps you can't as an in-house personnel. They may have other considerations you have to think about an outside investigative counsel that doesn't routinely do work for a company or a firm. I think is well situated to handle an important investigation, whether it's fraud, whether it's corruption, whether it's white-collar crime, whatever it may be.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure here, right? The sporting world is very high pressure. It's very public facing. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm sure this one's going to be unfolding for quite some time since this criminal element has barely begun, and we will see what happens with this one. But let's go to our favorite, our Florida man, Tom. Yeah, so we wrap this party up here. Our Florida man wears his truth on his sleeve, literally. So a Florida man, John Balmer, was in line at the Kmart checkout when he was approached by the Pasco City Sheriff's deputy. He saw him walking in the store. Our man panicked and tried to hand off a bag of leafy green substance to the shopper in line behind him. Let me tell you, Tom, the bag was not full of oregano or cilantro. It was full of marijuana and meth. Unsurprisingly, the person behind him didn't want to take that bag, so Mr. Palmer paid for his items and left the bag on the ground. The clerk alerted the deputies, who picked up the baggie and promptly arrested him for drug possession. Now, Tom, I think that the deputies might have been tipped off by Mr. Balmer's shirt, which read, I kid you not, "Who needs drugs? No, seriously, I have drugs." It goes to show that when your wardrobe is probable cause, don't be surprised when your accessories are handcuffs. Now, amazingly, other people have worn their confessions on their chest as well. According to this article, a Kentucky woman was arrested for meth possession while wearing a shirt that read, "I love crystal meth." And another bright Florida man was busted carrying a bag of pot while wearing a Monopoly-themed t-shirt that read, "Go directly to jail." The moral of the story is when your fashion statement is an admission, the police take you at your word.
I guess fashionistas are different in Florida.
They tell the truth, baby. They tell the truth. Thanks for joining us on Two Gurus Talk Compliance. I'm Kristy Grant-Hart.
And I'm Tom Fox.